So you want to use manual mode on your camera, but you don't want your photos to look like this or this. Here are 3 settings you should pay attention to in order to have the proper exposure: shutter speed, aperture, and ISO. First, shutter speed. This controls how long your shutter is open when you take a picture. A lower shutter speed increases the exposure because it allows more time for light to come into the camera. In the same way, the quicker the shutter speed is, the less light that comes in. With a high shutter speed, you can capture crisp action shots that freeze the image, like this water, or you can capture motion blur with a slow shutter speed, like this picture, causing things to be smoother with the illusion of movement. While these can make for great photos, if your shutter speed is too low, your shot could become blurry when you don't want it to be, from even the smallest movements. Next, aperture. This controls how wide your lens is open. A lower aperture, which is referred to as your f-stop, means that your lens is open wider and more light can come in, which increases the exposure. And a higher aperture means the lens is more narrow and lets in less light, lowering the exposure. This photo was taken with a low f-stop, resulting in less depth of field, meaning that only objects closest to the camera are in focus. By contrast, this photo was taken with a high f-stop, resulting in more depth of field and the whole frame being in focus. By adjusting the aperture, you can isolate the focus of your picture by blurring the background with a low f-stop, or you can keep everything in focus with a higher f-stop for pictures of nature where you want to capture all the details. Unfortunately, when you change your f-stop, you either have to adjust your ISO or shutter speed to balance the exposure. Finally, iOS controls how sensitive your camera is to light. This means that a higher iOS brings up the exposure and a lower ISO brings it down. This is helpful in low light situations because you can increase your ISO and it will bring up the exposure a lot. However, the higher your ISO is, the more grain or fuzziness there will be. To illustrate, this photo was taken inside with a low ISO and has little grain. On the contrary, this photo was taken with a very high ISO and has a lot of grain. Overall, you will need to adjust each of these settings to get the best exposure possible. Thank you.